It was a typically warm and humid Durban evening. The Botanical Gardens was welcoming a new member to its family. Standing at 9 meters high at first sight, the living beehive is a rather curious oval apparition. In the shape of a traditional Zulu hut or iqukwane, the steel frame is covered in indigenous plants and shrubs to withstand the elements known as the living layer. The living beehive is intended to get people thinking about nature and the way in which we are connected to it.
And when planet Earth tumbled out of there, Nkulunkulu decided there needed to be some life on that planet Earth. Nkulunkulu created oceans.
Standing inside the hut, surrounded by the lush green vegetation all around, this is not hard to feel. Minister in the Presidency, Trevor Manuel, announced the accreditation of the South African National Biodiversity Institute, SANBI, the brainchild behind the project, as a partner on the climate change adaptation front.
This beehive is about what we're capable of being, and what we need to be capable of is living at one with our environment. My visitation to that big hall down the road is that there are some things that we shouldn't be doing. You see, those of us who gather to negotiate actually don't represent our jackets or our egos. We are there to serve the best interests of the people, and we should never forget. And there is nothing that we see, feel, and touch around us as our biodiversity is. It's what we must engage with because it's fundamentally important to successive generations.
Manuel says the living beehive is a celebration of the marriage of traditional knowledge and modern-day engineering inspired by nature. But he warns that this joy could be short-lived should climate change negotiations taking place at COP17 not yield positive results with regards to commitments on the part of negotiators.
But it's a great celebration that stands imperiled by what's happening in the big hall down the road. If we want the Institute to be able to do this, then we need to understand that the Adaptation Fund is brought into being by a 2% share of the proceeds of all certified emissions reduction financing under the Kyoto Protocol. So you abandon the Kyoto Protocol, you abandon the source of funding, you weaken SANBI, you weaken our ability to reclaim our biodiversity, and as you do that, you also take food off the tables of the poor.
The project is funded by the Department of Environmental Affairs and the United Nations Industrial Development Organization with support from the eThekwini municipality. The South African National Biodiversity Institute began work on the structure in September this year. Institute Chief Director of Biodiversity Planning and Policy Advice, Crystal Max, says she's elated at receiving the accreditation status.
It's really telling us about the power of our biodiversity and our ecosystems. If brought together with technology, engineering and traditional approaches, we can unlock so much more in terms of climate change solutions. And the living layer is made up of indigenous species to South Africa, many medicinal plants that are used, and it really is going to be a legacy from the COP for generations to come and an inspiration to us about looking after our ecosystems for future generations.
Away from the sterile negotiating rooms at COP17, the living beehive takes one into the heart of just why thousands of delegates are in Durban trying to find compromises to tackle issues around climate change. Standing in the center of it, it emphasizes why living with nature as opposed to against it is a much calmer and sensible prospect. Minoshni Pillay, SABC News, Durban.